I remember getting so annoyed by the bebop scale. At first, I was like, wow, so we had a passing tone between the root and the flat seventh, making it an 8-note scale? And I'd play the scale and be like, oh my gosh, I'm landing on chord tones every downbeat. I thought this was chord tone heaven. But then if I started a phrase on a downbeat on any note other than a chord tone, now I'm on a non-chord tone for every single beat. It sounds bad. And if I dared started a phrase on an upbeat, I would just start overthinking so much, like, are my chord tones on a downbeat? What chord am I even on? Oh dang it, this chord actually ended 3 measures ago. Where am I now? And to top it all off, I feel like I didn't even hear this bebop scale from my heroes like Charlie Parker. It felt like they were playing something much more developed than this simple bebop scale. Can all that stuff by our heroes really just be explained by a simple bebop scale? Well, the answer is actually yes, but it will take some extra concepts to learn and master, which we'll go over today. All of these concepts I'll share with you today come from our resource, the Bebop Workbook by Cecil Alexander. In it, you'll find a wide variety of concepts and exercises all centered around maximizing the bebop scale in ways you may have never considered before. All of the materials are written in 12 keys for you, and even comes with recordings and backing tracks for everything. If you're interested in downloading this resource package, you can find the link to the download in the description below and use code BEBOP5 for $5 off. Alright, let's go ahead and get into it. Most of you probably already know what bebop scales are. In case you don't, here's a quick summary. They are scales used in jazz that take an ordinary 7-note scale like the dominant scale and turn it into an 8-note scale by adding a chromatic passing tone. This added major seventh gives us the G dominant bebop scale, and it enables us to land on a chord tone of our G7 chord on every single downbeat. And you probably already know that there are several kinds of bebop scales. The most fundamental ones are the major bebop scale and the dominant bebop scale. And the most notable solos throughout time by artists like Charlie Parker and Dizzy Gillespie. These bebop scales are almost entirely played as linear descending lines. Ascending lines tend to be based on arpeggios, so you'll very rarely hear anyone ascending with the bebop scale. So with this in mind, we'll be studying all these bebop scale techniques through the descending version. And later in this video, I'll finally show you how to mix them with ascending arpeggio concepts. Now, as I mentioned earlier in this video, these scales are great if you want to start on a downbeat every single phrase, which that will get really predictable after a while. So what if we wanted to start a phrase with a non-chord tone, like a chord extension, right on the downbeat? That would mean our bebop scale would lock us into playing non-chord tones, which is not what we want either. So what can we do? Well, the Bebop Workbook brilliantly showcases how to solve this problem and how to navigate any situation similar to this within any of the bebop scales. Let's take a look at this example that comes from page 2. Cecil shows us that on a G7 chord, if we were to start on a downbeat with a ninth, we can insert another chromatic passing tone between the ninth and the root. This will safely land us back onto a chord tone for the next downbeat, allowing us to return to the original dominant bebop scale. This is actually exactly what Charlie Parker does in the opening of his famous solo over the jazz standard Just Friends. So that's pretty neat. That was it for the ninth. What about if we started on the 11th? The 11th or 4th to the 3rd within a dominant chord is a half-step interval. There's no passing tone that could work. So what do? Well, boom! Cecil actually solved it for us in a really melodic way. You just turn this 11th into a 2-note chromatic enclosure around the 3rd. And just like that, now we're back on a chord tone for the downbeat. What if we started on the 13th? Well, we see here we can just add a chromatic passing tone between the 13th and the 5. Solved! Great, so that was the dominant bebop scale. Let's quickly go over the solutions for the major bebop scale. The major bebop scale will have you landing on the 1, 3, 5, and 6 on downbeats, because our added chromatic passing tone is between the 5 and the 6. So, what if you started off on a major 7th on a downbeat? Is our life over? No. The Bebop workbook shows an easy solution. Put a chromatic passing tone between the 7th and the 6th. Now, you're back onto a 6th for a downbeat and can resume the scale reliably. What if you started on the 9th? The solution is the same as the dominant bebop scale solution. Add a chromatic passing tone between the 9th and the root. Sweet! What if you start on the 11th? The solution is also the same as the dominant bebops. Turn this 11 into a 2-note chromatic enclosure around the 3rd. Amazing! But it gets even deeper. What if you started on a non-diatonic tone? Something outside of the key of G major 7. Is it all over? Is it time to just quit? No, not at all. The Bebop workbook shows that if you land on the flat 9th, ouch, you can just turn this into a 2-note enclosure around the root, and it actually ends up sounding pretty cool. Ta-da! If you started on the sharp 9, you can turn this into an enclosure around the natural 9th, and then insert the solution that we discussed earlier of what to do if you were to land on the natural 9th on a downbeat. Add a passing tone between this 9th and the root. Now we're back into the bebop scale. This is really starting to sound like bebop. If you started on the sharp 11th, you can turn it into a 2-note chromatic enclosure around the natural 11th, then insert the solution for landing on an 11 that we discussed earlier, turning this into a 2-note chromatic enclosure around the 3rd. Wow, what a slick recovery. If you started on the flat 13th, turn this into a 2-note chromatic enclosure around the 5th. Now you're back onto a chord tone. And finally, if you started on a flat 7th, ouch again, but it happens, you could turn this into a 2-note chromatic enclosure around the 6th. And just like that, we're back into the bebop scale. Won't you look at that? For all 12 notes of the chromatic scale, there's a hip way to play the bebop scale. All this information I just went over is much more conveniently laid out in the actual workbook itself. It also includes the Phrygian dominant bebop scale, which is tremendously effective for 5/7 flat 9 chords that you find in minor 2/5s. Now before we take a look at some really cool examples of how to mix this with upwards arpeggios, I need to share with you a couple of things I really wish I knew sooner about the bebop scales. If you didn't already know, the dominant bebop scale can be reliably used over a couple of other different chords. One of them is the 2 half diminished 7 chord, which you'll see in minor 2/5-1s. This kind of chord, like a G half diminished 7, is technically an upper structure of a dominant chord and major 3rd below this root. So in this case, a dominant chord a major 3rd below G half diminished is an E flat 7. Both of these chords are diatonic to each other, and they share the exact same parent scale. G half diminished 7 would use the G Locrian mode, which is the 7th mode of A flat major. The E flat dominant 7 would use the E flat Mixolydian mode, which is the 5th mode of A flat major. So going back to this G half diminished 7 chord, you can also reliably use the E flat dominant bebop scale. Starting the scale from the root of our G half diminished chord, the E flat dominant bebop scale will have your downbeats expressing the root, flat 3rd, flat 5th, and flat 6th. These are all important notes to express for this chord, as the avoid tone in this chord is the flat 9th. Thankfully this scale avoids this on the downbeats. A quick shortcut that summarizes all that information I just said is this. On half diminished 7 chords, just think of the dominant 7 chord from the flat 6th. Boom. In the other chord that you can use the dominant bebop scale are regular 2 minor 7 chords. If G7 is a 5/7 chord, the 2 minor 7 would be the D minor 7. The fundamental mode that goes with this is the D Dorian scale. So what's the D Dorian bebop scale? The D Dorian bebop scale contains a passing tone between the flat 3rd and the 4th. As you can see, this is just a mode of the G dominant bebop scale. You won't be landing on the flat 7 on downbeats for this iteration, and that's okay. You'll be landing on the 6 instead, which still sounds great, and it heavily simplifies playing this sound over 2/5 progressions. As with this 2/5, just use the same scale over the same downbeats. However, should you still want to stress the flat 7th on downbeats anyway, you could move the passing tone to between the flat 7 and the root instead, resulting in another form of the minor bebop scale. Nothing wrong with this, but it is an extra scale to think about and shed. So if you're just starting off with all these concepts, it'd probably drive you less crazy to first just focus on the major bebop scale and the dominant bebop scale. So great, just those 2 scales alone opens up the possibility of applying these scales to just about 90% of chords of all jazz standards. You're welcome. These scales are very much worth your time to practice. Okay, let's go ahead and move on to a couple of neat examples and exercises that come from Cecil Alexander's Bebop workbook. On page 43 in the chapter entitled Bebop Arpeggio Study, he displays an exercise that'll help you develop a foundation in connecting the most important diatonic 7th structures within major 7th chords. As we can see here, we see a chord from the root G major 7, which gives us the 1, 3, 5, and 7. Then we see a chord from the third B minor 7, which gives us the 3, 5, 7, and 9 of G major 7. And finally, we see a chord from the 6th E minor 7, which gives us the notes 6, 1, 5, and 7. Any other possible diatonic 7th chord structure found inside of G major 7 would give us the avoid tone, the 4th C. These 3 upper structures avoid C and has us playing all the good notes that are always safe to land on at any point. Now let's hear how he smoothly connects all these structures together using the concepts and solutions of the bebop scale that we've talked about so far in this video. Cool, after the first structure, we went down to the 6. And remember what we do if we land on a 6 on a downbeat for major bebop scales? We add a passing tone between here and the 5th, and that's exactly what happens here. Now we'll just walk down the scale till we get to the 3rd. This marks the beginning of the structure found from the 3rd, B minor 7, which we arpeggiate up. We'll go down to the root of G major 7 on beat 3, so no need for any solutions, as we can just reliably descend the G major bebop scale, as we do here. Now, Cecil wants to target the 6th E on the next beat 1. So right before that E, we just play a chromatic approach below it, which smoothly voice leads up to it at the perfect timing. Now we ascend up this E minor 7 structure with an arpeggio. After we go down and land on, an 11 on a downbeat. How do we recover? No worries, as the book had already provided us the solutions, remember? We will turn this into a 2-note chromatic enclosure around the 3rd of our G major 7. Excellent. Now we're back in the major bebop scale. We just descend down it as normal, and we land back on the root. Amazing. Let's hear it all one more. Super cool stuff. This is just one of the many exercises in this book, and honestly there's so much material that it'll keep you busy practicing for years. Finally, let's end this video off by taking a look at one of the phrases from this book that really embodies everything that we've discussed today. This one is found on page 80 in the chapter of Bebop Phrases. This really captures everything that we've talked about. We began the phrase on C7's 9th, so the solution was to add a chromatic passing tone to the root. Then we descend the dominant bebop scale as normal. Now we dip down with a surprise large interval to the chromatic approach tone to 2. From here, we ascend this note's arpeggio, D minor, and then go down to the flat 13 or sharp 5. Is it over for us? No. Remember the solution from earlier? We can just play a 2-note chromatic enclosure around the 5th. That's what Cecil does here. Now that we're back on a chord tone for a downbeat, we'll just descend the scale till we get to the 3rd. From here, we just ascend this structure, E half diminished 7, then play a 1, 2, 3, 5 melodic sound. Arriving to this flat 7th, we'll play a 2-note chromatic enclosure around the 6th, just because why not? We already learned that no matter where we land, we can always recover. So now we're on the 6th for a downbeat. What does Cecil do? Rather than immediately recovering, he surprises us with a descending upper structure from the flat 7th. So this is a descending B flat major 7th. All of these notes diatonic to C7. This lands us on the 6th again, and now he recovers by adding that passing tone, which brings us onto the 5th for the downbeat. Let's hear it all again. Isn't that amazing? No matter where we are in any chord, there is always a solution to get us back into a familiar sound, the bebop scale. Bebop scales serve as a terrific foundation for us to master using chromaticism in a melodic way. Oh, all right, everyone. Thanks so much for watching this video. Again, the Bebop workbook written by Cecil Alexander can be found in the description below, and you can use the code BEBOP5 for $5 off. If this video helped, please consider leaving a like and subscribe below, as it really helps this channel grow. And as always, feel free to leave a comment below of what else you might like to see from us. I actually just moved to New York, which gives me access to all the great musicians of New York. If there's someone you'd like me to attempt to reach out to, please let us know and I'll try to bring them on and make it happen. Thank you again, everyone. I'll see you next time.